The temptation to deny the reality of truth does not often attack the mind. It is a suicidal temptation that comes only in moments of surfeit or despair. Commoner and less easily mastered is the temptation to adorn the truth. Indeed, this is not so much a temptation as an original sin, because the truth never appears to us naked, but clothed and masked in sensations and in language which it takes rare courage even to wish to strip off. No doubt, cowardice here, as elsewhere, is folly, for however tragic or desolating the truth might be, it will not be abolished by concealing it, and the facts will operate against us all the more fatally if we childishly insist on not admitting them. Meantime, we shall have condemned ourselves to insecurity, confusion, and living with a bad conscience, and we shall have missed the knowledge to which our intellect is by nature addressed, a knowledge that, far from adding to the evils it may discover, masters these evils intellectually and partly balances them by the human and proud pleasure of understanding them. Nevertheless, the keen air of truth is not for all lungs. The psyche vegetates before she thinks, and when she thinks, far from suspending her vegetative functions, she is merely extending and refining them into a far reaching sensibility to external influences and improbable events. This difficult adjustment has its excitements and rewards. It fills the spirit with images and passions, yet it is a nuisance to the slumbering organism. There would be more comfort in continuing to pulsate in perfect darkness and freedom. It might be more dangerous, but it would feel safer. If shooting pains or dull obstructions disturb sometimes that prenatal bliss, they would serve to heighten the love of it and to turn it into a positive ideal. And in fact, this ideal remains the background and substance of all our later dreams of Elysium and a golden age, a paradise and nirvana. In contrast with this, intelligence and the facts discovered by intelligence belong to a world of care, of slavery to external things. The truth, for the psyche, remains always an imposition. Sometimes she bows to it sullenly, sometimes she rebels against it, and angrily maintains that her radical feelings are much more to be trusted. In her happiest moments, she forgets the quarrel and builds with all the materials that experience has given her a world of her own, not too false to live with for a while, and not so true as to check her animal joy in living. She is an artist, and her world must have the truth and the falsity of art. This art is not all music or verbal fiction. It is also laborious construction in the realm of matter, or in morality and legislation, imposing on the plastic parts of the world a method agreeable to human interest. Heroic men are intent on reality, but less in reverence for what reality may be, or for the truth of it, than in prophecy of what it ought to be, or may speedily be turned into by their agency. The extreme of energy curiously reverts, in respect to truth, to the extreme of primitive solemnness and vegetative egoism. Edens and millenniums reappear, not now as lost, but as future. They are defined and demanded by the native force of the psyche, and such premonitions may be true if the psyche has the means to realize her purposes in action. She will then seem to have not only divined the truth of the future, but miraculously recreated the world in her own image. Such an apparent miracle is physically possible and normal because the psyche is herself a current in the realm of matter, capable, like any other current, of cutting a channel for itself between banks that will afterwards seem to have come into being expressly to guide it on its intended course. Yet just those windings were never prefigured by the waters at the spring. Either the prophet then will surreptitiously take hints from his worldly wisdom, or he will be compelled to transpose his prophecy into a mere ideal to be realized, if at all, only in another world or only within us. That is, only by being steadfastly maintained as an ideal in contrast to the unfortunate truth. When a man frames a utopia and calls it by that name, he frankly avows the rebellion of his inner man against the concrete truth. Yet, if the roots of that vision are very deep in his soul, or if the vision is contagious and people confirm one another in entertaining it, it will not long be called a utopia, but soon a higher truth, revealed miraculously and accredited by supernatural faith. To extend the word truth to such a region puts a great strain on language and on honesty. A sad waste of spiritual passion comes of looking for truth where, by the nature of things, truth is not to be found in images, in metaphors, in religion, in moral emotion. These things, excellent or inevitable in their own sphere, are rendered inordinate by that pretension. Instead of being poetically beautiful and just, they become scientifically false and morally fanatical. A better language would have invented a word other than truth to express the magic of these visitations. The Greeks hardly asked whether their religion was true or how far their legends about antiquity might be historical. That would have been a blind and pedantic question. They asked only that their religion should be traditional and legal, propitious to the spirit of the city and to the purgation of private crimes, which myth and worship might well be without the mechanism of such beneficence being in the least understood. Myths were not true and were not false. They were tales appropriate to tell and to marvel at on specific occasions. They dramatized the true relations of man to nature, reconciling him to the truth without picturing the truth, and by their medicinal influence they rendered his ignorance happy in the assurance that the truth, if not always friendly to the grosser man, might be liberating in the end to the spirit. The truth is the chosen object, and therefore the good of the intellect, of so much of our nature as demands enlightenment and is concerned with circumstances or with the past and future course of existence. But these are not our only interests, and the truth is neither our primary good nor our ultimate good, nor the synthesis of all goods, but its inclemency. The truth often drives us indoors to our home comforts and familiar affections, and by its precision and contingency, for many things are not true, it also carries us willingly or unwillingly beyond the truth into the region of the imagined or the desired or the beautiful. Genius is requisite to divine the truth, but not all kinds of genius take that direction, and a steady affinity to truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, while eminently virtuous and honorable, marks rather a prosaic mind, a cold mind, a mind limited to the safe middle ground of competence and sagacity. Happiness in the truth is like happiness in marriage, fruitful, lasting, and ironical. You could not have chosen better, yet this is not what you dreamt of. Enthusiasts are consequently seldom satisfied with the truth. They posit something else, much better, warmer, and vaguer, yet it would chill their enthusiasm to posit this nobler thing as not true, as merely possible or frankly impossible. They have far too dazzling an idea of the truth to recognize the plain truth when they see it. They keep that sacred name for the good, for the all satisfying, for the ineffable. The consequence is that we have in religion and in idealistic philosophy a baffling reversal of terms. The existent is called appearance, illusion, or privation, while something imaginary or notional, or perhaps absolutely blank, is called both reality and truth. That this mystical ultimate good is something in which life issues or may issue, that it is imminently experienced in moments of ecstasy, that it seems when found the sudden solution and quietus for every trouble. All this may be freely admitted by a sober critic, and he will have no serious difficulty in making room for these experiences in his picture of the truth, which should be a description of all existence. Love has a rhetorical habit of keeping all eulogistic terms on one object, no matter how incompatible these terms may be, and in impassioned speculation it is impossible for the most irresponsible intuitions coming in a trance not to claim to be called true, although they may annul rather than describe the detail of the world. In reality, the mystic is passing beyond truth. Truth oppresses him, and something beneath or above truth satisfies him completely. He is free to choose, yet however much he may congratulate himself on his flight from existence and from the truth that describes existence, the most that he could legitimately say about his new condition would be that it revealed to him a further region of truth and existence, far superior in his estimation to the region he had abandoned. The very fact of his salvation would continue to posit the reality of those sins or illusions from which he had been saved, and the truth recognized by him would not be, as he may assert thoughtlessly, only his final beatific vision, but this following upon and substituted for his previous experience. If having attained what he calls the truth, he shut his eyes to the existence of his previous errors, he would now be hugging the most egregious and egotistical error of all. Not only would he be insisting that a form of being was true, which perhaps was merely intense and described nothing, but he would be positively denying that this form of being and its relation to all other describable things might be described truly. Perhaps the fault here touches diction and manners rather than insight. There is insight in saying that existence is privation, since any fact, in being such as it is, prevents itself and the truth about it from being all that is different. But only a perverse temper would express this by saying that privation was nothing, and that consequently neither suffering, error, nor finitude could at all exist. We might rather say, though this too is hyperbole, that only privation and finitude involving suffering and error made existence possible. But finitude does not involve error if we assert no more than we know, and privation is not suffering if we are willing to be ourselves. A less mystical religious way of going beyond truth is to personify it. The truth is not a person, it is a mind. Yet, for other reasons, we may have conceived a vigilant lawgiver and judge who will ultimately punish our hidden sins or vindicate our innocence. And evidently, such a deity must see in secret and must be omniscient. The truth in all its detail, scope, and eternity will then lie open to this divine mind. And if we forget for the moment the other attributes of God, such as power and love, we may say that God not only knows the truth, but is the truth existing in act. The trick of identifying or not yet distinguishing intuition and essence, runs through the history of speculation and breeds a thousand misunderstandings. In this case, it would be easy to show that intelligence, though it might eventually traverse all truth in every direction, would in each act of thought be something temporal, progressive, and selective, since it is the utterance of a proposition, so that intelligence moves in another realm of being from truth, intelligence being alive and truth being dead, to represent the truth as living, as the light of universal intuition flooding a divine mind, dramatizes the truth and puts it before us as something to be achieved and possessed. This may pass for a compliment to the truth and may facilitate an excited love of it. The business of a good myth is precisely to humanize the realities which it plays upon and to render them more amiable. Truth turned into the thought of an omniscient mind is enormously glorified, at least in human eyes. Yet this living splendor is not its own. Truth proper is indifferent to being praised or possessed by anybody. Its sublimity is of another kind, and a love stimulated by the hope of glory is addressed to dreams of human achievement rather than to a truly divine truth. The impulse to dramatize the truth is carried further in romantic philosophy. Even when personified, the truth remains too external, too chilling and ominous for a sophistic poet, proud of his every mood and sure only of his present sensation. An endless comedy of vital errors seems to him worthier of a living spirit than a sardonic omniscience. The very notion of truth, though he cannot banish it altogether, becomes elusive and ghostly. Why should a free and unconditioned mind posit a truth at all? Or if the exigencies of acting and thinking compel a man to posit something, why not posit his whole world as expressly false, like an actor positing the circumstances set down for him in a play? The truth he posits will be a part of his fiction. It will not pledge or contaminate his creative freedom, and he may say in his heart that he has passed beyond truth. We have already seen that a perfectly happy creature, one free from hindrance and care, might develop a great sensibility without broaching the idea of truth. A Lucifer might convince himself on internal evidence that he was an uncreated spirit, free to invent romantic societies and gay sciences for his endless entertainment. These he would posit beyond truth, that is, as revealing no compulsion and imposing no responsibility. Lucifer might believe in nothing so long as he did nothing. Ideas, when they are mere ideas, leave us free and as ignorant as if we had never had them. If a spirit could actually exist in vacuo, it might harmlessly posit world after world, positing them as false or as existing merely an idea. Truth would then not be conceived or invoked at all, yet it would not be annulled. It would hover above the dreaming idealist as ironically as ever, since it would be composed of his whole history, past and future, with his successive fictions ad infinitum, something surely unknown to him, being entirely different from any of the worlds which, at various moments, he might have quite truly posited as false. Had he ever paused to collect his thoughts and review his illusions, he would at that moment have posited his biography not as false but as true, for he would not now conceive himself to be composing an imaginary biography, a novel about himself, but would be convinced that he had really dreamt all those dreams, and if his whole past and whole future could thus be summoned before his conscience, and he saw the whole truth about himself, I'm afraid he would ipso facto have stopped living, ceased to posit obviously false sciences and imaginary lives, and felt the truth absorb and paralyze his playful spirit. For mankind, compelled as we are by our animal status to do and to undergo many specific things, the face of truth is more familiar and less benumbing. We are obliged to believe in the postulates we make, and we are obliged to make them because they are true. Faith and truth are thus allied for us from the beginning. The postulate relevant to action is relevant to reality, and where it is action that prompts and controls thought, thought cannot be merely romantic or poetical. It will be initially addressed to immediate and urgent facts, and it will follow the true course and relations of these facts with a rough fidelity. Truth is thus a household presence, not the naked truth or the divine truth, but truth disguised as a domestic and dressed in homespun. Not to recognize such conventional truths in the home orbit would be idiocy, and to contradict them would be madness. Yet the same natural life that relies on truth and is sure of it within this range inevitably transgresses and overloads the truth which it recognizes. From childhood up, we are carried beyond the truth by our passions, by the qualities and perspectives of our senses, by verbal conventions and beliefs, above all by our vehement judgments about good and evil. There is a sense in which all moral life lies beyond truth. Not, of course, that for an external observer, the whole course of our passionate feelings would not fall within the purview of history and be truly describable, but the living spirit in which this moral life is actualized and enacted has other interests besides the interest in truth. The modesty of nature calls for a halt in the direction of knowledge, as in all other directions, not only respecting the depth to which we may penetrate the facts, but also respecting the purity and clearness we may claim for our conceptions. It would be inhuman and fanatical to set up the truth as the only good. The good is the perfection of life for each creature according to its kind, a perfection which man can never reach without knowledge of his immediate circumstances and his own nature. Potentially, spirit has an innate affinity to all truth, even to all essence, and this, like all other spiritual interests, is disinterestedly addressed to its ideal object and terminates there. Yet here, spirit is lodged in a specific creature, so that the development of these potential interests can be only partial and mutually qualified. Even charity, a disinterested sympathy with spirit in its every predicament, cannot be impartial in all directions and at all removes. Absolutely universal and unbiased charity would abate contrary impulses and would utterly dissolve the too sympathetic soul. Truth cannot dictate to love. Will and aspiration move entirely beyond the actual and forbid the human spirit to attune itself to truth only. Nearer things and lovelier things also solicit it. We must turn to them, yet not without a constant speculative reverence for the truth in its divine immensity.